So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services that we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find a layer of understanding of the spring feast, autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we study then the documents of the Israelic lineage, of the Hebraic lineage, then we come to the conclusion. Then Yeshayahu chapter 1:8 explains then the first holy city on the land of Cush. And also, most importantly, at the moment, is for us then to understand that there is religion and there is fact. There is the presence of the Creator via His holy instructions, where then the first tabernacle service was instituted by Moshe, and then the people were obviously very in tune with the ways of the Creator while they were in the desert. And then when the Messiah came, obviously the 61st chapter, where you find then the first layer related with the spring feast, he came and he completed the spring feast. So then he started then towards the second tabernacle services. So then after 2009, then the holy cities obviously are on their way of returning. And at the moment, we are during the time of the restoration period, and then studying the Daniel, the 11th chapter, we find then obviously chapter 11, verse number 5, where then, and the kingdom of the south shall be strong. As we understand this topic of nations coming together and the organizing of the countries, you find then the kingdom of the east, China, kingdom of the north, the Soviet Union, a kingdom of the south, then Africa. Not only this, but then Africa will be great. So then, let's understand a bit regarding then Ezekiel. He was also a prophet. He was a prophet related also with tabernacling. He was in exile along with Daniel. Then he lost his wife, and he had a very rough time while he was on service, on duty for the Almighty Creator. But then you find in the 37th chapter of Ezekiel, where then the restoration of both of the sticks of authority of Ishmael and Yitzhak, and at the moment we are then experiencing the first also chapter of Ezekiel, awaiting for the first gear of the machine of Ezekiel to be turned on, and this is precisely then next year, 71-4. If you evaluate the number of events of the next year, you find then the Brics countries are obviously working on developing the trade system via the computer, because Daniel then in 12th chapter mentioned regarding then the knowledge would increase for the purposes of trade. If you evaluate, you find the Brics countries, obviously China being the top, and Brazil unfortunately is then the lowest, and we should receive help next year when Brics comes then to Brazil, and Brazil will host the Brics gathering. Not only this, but there is the presidential election next year also, and at top of it there is the World Cup, and then most importantly in Africa there is the situation regarding then China, the most companies of China, very important companies coming down then to DRC. Thus then we understand when the prophet Yeshayahu mentioned regarding then and the place beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Woe to the land beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, because there is an event that's going to take place. So then, as DRC or Congo is then organizing themselves, you find then China next year placing up then a showcase with the most important Chinese companies, where then many deals will be made. From this topic then you will understand the first piece of the machine of Ezekiel then being turned on. Next year is extremely important. You find already the Brics countries coming together. You find then The Soviet Union being also updating their own systems. You find then South Africa next month then sending up their equipment in space for their signal. You find China already with the signal, then only awaiting for the proper time. You find India having a turnaround that's absolutely amazing. Then you find India in a short time of a month and a half, they were able to make foreign exchange of the amount of 280 plus billions. This truly is indicating the rapid forward motion of the Brics system. Next year then you can expect absolutely without a doubt then the first section of Ezekiel's machine being turned on. Simply means synchronization of events. Extremely important, because next year you will understand then the new system. Not only this, but then Africa next year then obviously placing up their equipment in space and then obviously covering themselves with the system. You find then the importance of coming up with the computer. The US unfortunately is profounding themselves. They are more and more involved and entangled with this spying system, and they don't realize their task, their objective is the monitoring of the percentages, because the US yet holds the most important monetary system in the world, and then they can come up with these computerized system, so then the Chinese yuan can take over its place. But then US must watch the percentages, where each country must have their own modules, so then every person doing trade with the world, doing trade with the Chinese system, doing trade amongst the nations using a computer from home, so then taxes can be gathered. It's extremely important having these then systems set up. Brazil has 20% of coltan, so US doesn't have to fight in Congo. As we understand, then the armies are again fighting against each other, and the fighting is intensifying, while then we should expect the Middle East to come up then with the peace talks very shortly. The Messiah, when you read in the 24th chapter of Ezekiel, you find then the Messiah speaking, you will to hear of war. The first word is singular, and rumors of wars. Then it's plural, because when you read then Daniel the 11th chapter, you won't find any other place involved with the war, except then later when there is then the war of the final moment, then when closes the autumn feast. So then, what can we understand of this section? 24th chapter of Ezekiel explains, when the Messiah spoke, and the time is not yet, he said, you will to hear of war, and rumors of wars, yet the time is not yet. So it's not yet is indicating that there is a section of peace. There is a section where the world will be involved with harmonizing itself, so then the Creator can show the world what the new world is going to be. Wisely he has decided, and you can read it for yourself. When you read very intently the 24th chapter of Ezekiel, you will find the Messiah speaking very plainly. And the time is not yet, because there is a period of harmony, where then the world will experience then the peace of the Creator himself, indicating how it's going to be in the future when this earth is going to be refurbished. Thus then you understand later Zechariah, then you will understand also the areas of the Creator himself being the very center then in New Jerusalem. So then, as we find ourselves studying these documents, it is very imperative not awaiting only to be entertained with the holy instructions. It takes a study. It takes time. It takes discipline. If you understand, the Messiah had disciples. Disciples comes from the word discipline. They were the disciplined ones. So if you expect of receiving from heaven understandings of the holy instructions, and you do not do your homework, and always criticizing, you will not understand. However, if you take your time as you brush then your mouth every day, so as reading the holy instructions gives you more insights of the holy instructions. It's kind of obvious. But then we should expect next year, 71:4, then the first understanding of Ezekiel, the first chapter, where then the machine then is placed in motion. Then you find Daniel 11:5, and the kingdom of the south shall be strong. How can you understand this? Because Congo has many areas of the country, it's nearly in the center of Africa, and they have many rare materials, rare minerals. As then China makes a deal with the Congo, then they begin to organize themselves for the final section of the organization of the mines. So then the Brics system, later becoming the Chinese system, is then launched, and then they begin to do trade via computer. The only problem of the situation obviously is at the moment the lack of the computer. So US unfortunately is neglecting this very important section. Let's explain then a bit what this means. You find then China, very prosperous nation. They are investing a lot in urban areas, also in farms. Then, as you can understand, the Bitcoin system, where there is already a monetary system not linked with the central bank. You find then China, they have the yuan, the Chinese yuan, paper money with their own central bank, and the virtual system not yet launched. Then when it becomes launched and protected by production, then you will understand a direct link of China and your own computer. There is no link with the central bank. So then the point is how nations are going to then to derive taxes from this system if they can't link themselves with it. Has to have a computer, so then has to have regulations, and then a link of Chinese system in your own computer, the Chinese system and the central bank in your computer, and your computer with the local banks, and the local banks with the Chinese system, and local banks with the central bank. How are they going to charge taxes? There are no laws yet placed, so then they can get the modules, so then each computer used at home, they can receive their dues and pay their dues. How does it work? When you then take your money where you are at any place in the world, you find then a monetary system where you can exchange your paper money, and you buy then the Chinese yuan virtual. You store it in your computer. Via this system you can purchase from China, and you can invest in China, but there is no link with the central bank. When there is a link with the central bank, then you receive a module that gives you then the proper percentages where you then earn from them, you can buy from them, then you can pay your dues. Without these, the nations simply can't charge you taxes. It then becomes a chaos worldwide. As USA then is very heavily involved with spying, they should have thinking as then the guardians of the percentages, where then each nation should have a module, where each nation should produce modules for their own people. So each person then doing trade with the system, they receive a module, they plug in the computer, and then they do trade. But there's not only this, there is then the link of each computer from a nation to the other nation. And this has to be done real time. When there is a trade, a purchase, or then there is a exchange from one nation to the other, taxes must be gathered, must be done instantly, so each central bank receives their due taxes. So then, Next year, then, South Africa is going to launch their equipment in space, thus then giving themselves this important signal and covering themselves when the system becomes available. South Africa already has launched equipment in space, but this time they have also intentions of using the trade, and their signal must be then obviously becoming available for every person. But the most important is then the computer. At the moment, not only this, but then the freighters of the earth. Then when a person makes a purchase using the system, when they purchase an item, must be then generated a label of the freighter. When they do this, obviously they have to have a description, price, and then taxations taken from the item instantly. So then taxes can be gathered then from what they purchase. If they don't do this, nations then are starved of their taxes, bringing chaos. And we're expecting this system to be launched in the next 24 to 27 months. Because as you begin to understand the entire Pacific, they are linking themselves up. Not only with China, but then with India, with South Africa. Then, obviously in the future with Brazil. Brazil, unfortunately, is the weakest of the Brics. Brazil is isolated. It is heavily involved with sports, heavily involved with disasters, and the government is very, very, very weak. So then, as we expect next year of hosting then the Brics, we expected then India also, the foreign minister, to come to Brazil and then trying to recuperate what we have lost. Not only this, but then we should have our own module in what our government expects from the system. It's not protecting Brazil from the system, it's preparing for it. Because when the system is launched, you simply download in your computer. It's not the fact of protecting a country from, it's simply awaiting for the proper time because people will to download on their computers. The situation is how the nation is going to take taxes from it. And this can't be avoided. Because it's the plan of the Creator then, so then when we read Galah, then we understand what the Messiah said, and the freighters of the earth were then in charge. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.